Good morning, good afternoon, and evening, baseball fans. Welcome back to the Barstool Baseball Show. It's Carl. I am joined by Chris Castellani, and today we are talking about the biggest disappointments of the 2023 MLB season. Chris, is it wrong for me to say that this is in your wheelhouse as a disappointed baseball fan?
Because I'm constantly disappointed? Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think that it's a unique list to do because it's been a great baseball season, but I feel like baseball more than any because of the length of the season, lends itself to anomalies and lends itself to disappointments. I mean, there's a lot of players. I think this year, especially with the new rules being implemented, we've seen a lot of, at one point, elite players kind of take steps backwards. A lot of teams who've struggled quite a bit. So yeah, I would say disappointment in many ways is my forte. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the midst of it now. I did a show with my buddy last night about it with the Cubs and them losing the last two games in just about heartbreaking fashion. But we're not isolating it to moments. I think this is more narratives and storylines.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we just kick things off? I asked you to raw dog a list of 1 through 5. I put one together. We have not shared anything that we've said. So this is just from our own brains. There's a little bit of like snake draft feel here. So maybe if I take one of yours, we'll just figure out what happens. I don't really have the format planned. I do know that I have something that's most disappointing this season. Okay?
Okay.
I'll kick off if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Because I think the number one thing we have to say, the most disappointing thing this entire season involves a large group of players, a great manager, a ton of money, a well-respected executive, all the expectations in the world, and the San Diego Padres can't make the playoffs?
Can't make the playoffs, can't finish above 500 until last night, unable to win an extra inning game.
Can't. But, slow down, because I know where you're going right now. You got all your ammunition ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
We need as baseball fans just take a deep breath, and everyone just sink your teeth into this. The 2023 Mariners can't even go to they can't even go to the playoffs.
Wait,
they have the best players.
You said Mariners, you meant Padres, right?
Of course.
Yeah, okay, just making sure. Yeah.
That's how worked up I am. No, the San Diego Padres, Juan Soto, Fernando Tatis Jr., AJ Preller, Blake Snell's going to win the Cy Young. It's a joke.
That is the weirdest thing about the Padres, is that I think if we would have gotten to the end of this year and said, okay, this guy got injured, this guy underperformed, you play out enough 162 game season, sometimes you're going to have those bad breaks. They've had transcendent seasons from their stars. Snell winning the Cy Young. Hader's been locked down as a closer. Fernando Tatis is the best defensive right fielder in baseball. And yet, no playoffs, really, I think they haven't officially been eliminated yet. They haven't really had a run in which you went, okay, here come the Padres. It's been a million stops and starts and not that much bad luck. Ha-Seong Kim's got a 6-WAR season, nothing to show for it. Not only is that number one with a bullet, I would say if we're talking all-time underachieving teams, they're on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. This San Diego Padres team is maybe, all things considered, the most disappointing team I can think of in the last. Look at me go. I have no idea.
I'm trying to think if there's any that compares, because usually underachieving teams, it's either World Series or bust, and maybe they'll lose in the ALDS or they'll lose in the World Series. But when you talk about a team with World Series aspirations that isn't even going to make it into the 12-team field, I can't think of any. Now, there may be a team in the National League or in the National League East that may have something to say about it, but still.
Yeah.
I think the Padres are way worse, though. I think because of the market and because of the story around Steve Cohen, I think a lot of people are going to throw shit at the Mets. Not saying it's undeserved, but at least the Mets admitted to the fuck up. Like Padres saw this through to the end and still couldn't, get any momentum going.
They have so much day-to-day generational talent in the lineup. And as we get to the Mets, it's like, yeah, of course there's red flags. Like, you guys haven't paid Pete Alonso. Who knows if he's happy or not? Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander are all banged up. Like, they're different rosters. So the Padres not making the playoffs with this roster is legendary stuff. Legendary.
Yeah. I also think, not to say that there's excuses, but when you had Frank on, he brought up the idea that with the new rules being implemented, the Mets kind of aged before our eyes. And while I'm not making excuses, I feel like when you look at the core that the Padres have, it felt like there was no way it wouldn't work. And, you've had a million stories come out about potential clubhouse issues, what have you. I feel like you kind of have to point to that because it's not like underperformance has been, the name of the game for Tatis and Machado and Snell. Just a complete mess there and saying really disappointing. I mean, I was looking forward to seeing what that team could do if they could contend in the West. They didn't. You brought up the Mets, and they will be brought up at some point here down the road as most disappointing teams, things, but the first thing I thought of when I assembled this list was not a team, it was a player. Because I can't recall really in any sport a player who's had a fall from grace and complete breakdown quite like Alec Manoah had in 2023. This guy was, to me, last season, I mean, you put a star by his name, all-star pitcher, nasty stuff, confident guy. Yeah, a bit cocky, but in a good way. And like arrogant in a way that like Roger Clemens was kind of arrogant, where it's like, I'm just going to throw right at you and I dare you to hit it. And for the first, honestly, on opening day against the Cardinals, you could tell something was wrong. It continued, lost the feel for everything. I mean, like it can't be overstated. Like every one of his pitches became ineffective, sent down to rookie ball, called back up, struggles, sent back down, refused a minor league start. There are some pitchers who struggle, and a few names will be brought up later on this list. But you always say, okay, well, maybe they were injured, maybe this happened, or maybe they had bad luck, maybe the peripherals are good, but just the regular numbers weren't there. When you look at what Alec Manoah needs to fix in the offseason, the answer is everything right now. It was a disastrous campaign. To be honest, the fact that the Blue Jays are going to make the playoffs with him being essentially the worst pitcher in baseball when he pitched is kind of incredible. I mean, it's a very talented lineup, but yeah, I mean, this is...
Yeah,
I got to put him number one just because I feel like we will talk, when we talk about the new rules being implemented and who was impacted the most, he'll be one of the first names that gets mentioned.
Why don't we just do this like a 1 through 10 or something then? So we'll just have them 2. We're going to have one final list on this. So Alec Manoah is number 2 on our list of most disappointments. He's brutal. And the attitude doesn't help because he's not exactly eliciting sentiment from me. I mean, it's Alec Manoah. Buddy, you kind of are a dick. Pitches like a dick. Has the attitude on the mound like a dick. So this is one of those like, it would just be different if it was like, I don't know, like Zach Greinke when he left. I think everybody kind of like, you're pulling for a guy like that. I don't know if everybody's pulling for a guy like Manoah, but he's generationally good. I don't know about that, but he was definitely a formative young power arm on a team with his trajectory. Now, good for that team to still continue despite losing their ace. Oh, Kevin Gossman's their ace. Who's their ace? Kevin Gossman or Alfie?
I would say they were legit. You could pick and choose depending on the day last year. Obviously, this season, Gossman firmly established himself. But you got to give credit to Barrios and Kikuchi. Those guys, they've bounced back and given them good years.
So then I'll go next. I'm going to put the Mets here. I can't get over it. The Mets. I know that the NL East is competitive. But at time of recording, the Mets record is 72-86. Their payroll is so high. Their payroll's, I believe, 10% higher than the next. They have two starting pitchers at the start of the season getting paid more than $40 million a year. I believe Francisco Lindor is the most expensive shortstop per year. Because I know it's 341 million. Ooh, Correa might be 41 million. That's a good question.
Yeah, I think in terms of AAV, I believe it's Correa, but obviously with Lindor, you have that decade-long contract. There's financial stability there. Yeah,
$162 million to Nimmo in the offseason. And he didn't play awful. He's not he's good. He's good.
I love Lindor. Yeah.
Yeah. I say Nimmo. Nimmo's played well this year after getting a big deal.
Oh, yeah, him too, yeah.
But just not in 1,000 years did anybody think the Mets would be sellers. Congratulations to Steve Cohen for having the balls to own up to the loss midseason. So they got a little bit out of it, but the fact that the Mets have just have not played competitive baseball since late May, mid-May. I mean, did they this year?
No, you know who started this run? It was the Tigers. I'm looking at their record right. They were 16-13 on May 3rd. So that's an 89 win pace. Nothing spectacular, but it seemed like, okay, the Mets are getting, they didn't get off to the hottest start the year before. They're coming into their own. They got swept in a 3-game series against the Tigers and then just fell apart. By the end of May, they were around 500, then ultimately kind of fell apart there. I think by June was really when that June swoon happened, and then they fell apart. But yeah, I mean, they were competitive there for a minute. Even with the Braves being what they are, the idea of this team being sellers at the deadline seemed like an impossibility. I think 3 is a perfect spot for them, because I think in the long run, what they did at the deadline will benefit the organization. It sucks for 2023, but hitting that ejector seat button probably saved them several years of pain. I feel like I think that they kind of rerouted and are ultimately going to end up being okay. But for this season, it was the most anticipated Mets team of all time, and therefore the biggest disappointment.
Who do you have next?
Okay, I don't have a team, but I have what a team did, if this makes sense. So hear me out. I knew the Los Angeles Angels weren't going to be a very good team, and they weren't. And when they made their big splash at the deadline, I think we all went, okay, this is a big risk. And, Clemmer ripped them apart, and I thought that it would fail. But the one thing I said is, hey, this makes the Angels way more interesting. At least Shohei Ohtani will play some meaningful baseball in September. Buddy, they didn't even make it to August before this thing completely fell apart. So I would say the Los Angeles Angels trade deadline as a whole is one of the most spectacular, disappointment almost doesn't even do it justice, spectacular blow-up failures that we've seen in the history of this sport, to a point where, go ahead.
Well, now we're starting to get out of the characteristic of a disappointment. I think, is it like Lucas Giolito? I thought everybody thought it was a stupid move. Maybe, I guess. Did you want to see Ohtani play somewhere else? I was disappointed Ohtani didn't get traded. I could buy into it's a failure for sure, but is it disappointment?
Then if that's a fair point, I would say, if you just break it down more narrowly, Ohtani being on the Angels at all post-deadline was a massive disappointment. I think we can go with that, because I think that we did the live stream. Thank you, Carl. We did the live stream when that deadline happened, and we ended up coming away from the trade deadline being like, oh man, that was kind of, there was some moves here or there, but that was a bit of a dud. And ultimately, this was such a great baseball season. It's been such a hectic baseball season. You've seen teams that a lot of people didn't expect, like the Orioles, having these great years. And you just wonder what this final 2 months could have been if Shohei Ohtani was on insert team here. We'll never know. And I know it ended with the injury and everything, but even Shohei Ohtani with a torn UCL still would have been a remarkable story on another ball club. The fact that he was left with the scrap heap pieces they picked up at the deadline, who ended up being put on waivers, that was the monumental disappointment to me of the deadline. So yeah, that's a fair point, man. I was a little bit too broad. Him still being on the Angels, disappointment.
I think when you narrow it like that, it's perfectly said, because all we want to do is see Shohei Ohtani play meaningful baseball. These playoffs are not as good as they can be, and they won't be until Shohei's in the stage. I had trade deadline 5th on my list, so I'm just going to use this as a footnote here on your part, because I thought the trade deadline, that was very disappointing. It was very disappointing because the Orioles had an opportunity to go out, do some big shit. That would have been great. We were ready for it. There was nothing. And I think it's the expanded playoff format. I think it's the 12 teams gives everyone more of a chance, not just this year, but next year and the year after that, and building a window, or, getting a playoff is so goddamn hard before with only one playoff, or with only one wild card team So I think it also impacts when you could say like, well, it could be just as hard next year and thereafter. So just kind of a dud trade deadline. All right. I have, am I 5?
No, you had the deadline as a whole at.
No. I was just saying that as a footnote of you and Ohtani. I'm not taking trade deadline. You just took Shohei Ohtani not moving at the trade deadline, which was the biggest disappointing thing of the trade deadline. I had the trade deadline as a whole very disappointing. I meant to say I had it number 5 on my list.
Okay.
I fucked that up. The audience is just as confused as you are. That's okay. We're not editing this out here, guys. I just meant that as like a footnote. The official list of number 5, not the trade deadline. The official list, most disappointing. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put Jose Abreu's season as a whole. Jose, is that too early? Is that too early for Jose Abreu?
I had another player ahead of him.
Okay. Who did you have ahead of him?
Former teammate Tim Anderson.
Ooh. Can we let's lump them together. Let's lump them together. First season not playing together. Yeah. And they're very close. So we'll say Tim Anderson / Jose Abreu's 2023 season.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, I think the reasons are there. The numbers are there. The reason I had Anderson ahead of him is that while Abreu had a bad year, I don't feel like his reputation really as a player or the way that other players feel about him was changed. Tim Anderson getting knocked the fuck out by Jose Ramirez in the middle of a career worst season is just a rough look, man. I mean, and ultimately, as bad as Abreu's been, he's in the second half, and he's not good. He's somewhat fit into that offense. They moved him down in the lineup. He's found some stability. Anderson's just never found that. Went a calendar year without hitting a home run. But yeah, I can't knock you for kind of lumping these guys together.
Yeah, Jose Abreu was an MVP not too long ago. And he didn't have the style of game that regresses the way it did this season. Jose Abreu's not a baseball player who just falls off a table. Like, he still has the bat control where you're like, all right, well, he'll just pepper it the other way. You know, maybe you'll see the batting average go up while the slug goes down. I'm sure that's what the Astros thought. No, everything went down. The strikeout rate, just atrocious. And again, he's a natural hitter. He's just a big, solid, natural, healthy, everyday hitter. He's played every day for the Astros, too, which has just been awful. Tim Anderson's option should probably get picked up by the White Sox, I would guess, because then that puts him in a free agency year, and he's like not going to be this bad 2 years in a row. Or maybe he is. Maybe everyone wants to drink the short-term Kool-Aid. I'm much more willing to consider the fact that he's a career 300 hitter, and the guy's like has a chip on his shoulder, can bounce back from this, take the off season, get your head right. I think maybe what's the option? 13 million? You gotta fucking pick that up.
Unless, yeah.
Bro, he's playing second base for Team USA. Like, this is not we're not talking about a guy who had like 1 or 2 good years. Like, he's unbelievably talented. If you stripped everyone of their major league uniforms and you went and threw him through the showcase prospect thing and you had to like rank the talented stuff, like, he's still going to grade out as one of the most athletic players in the game. His swing's still fucking, like, he can still bat the ball. There's got to be something going on injury related. I don't know. I would pick up the option on Tim Anderson, but this season in and of itself, just about as bad gets, as awful as it gets. Maybe all things considered, one of the worst seasons in modern baseball history.
Yeah, I mean, his on-base percentage is horrifically low, that was always the one knock against him, which is, man, the guy's bat-to-ball skills are great, hit for power, really good athlete. But I believe the year he won the batting title, he drew I'm not even kidding you, 14 walks, which, hey, made it work. It seemed like the league caught up to him, swinging and missing way more, chasing way more, and ultimately just not making hard contact. So, yeah, I think it's fair to lump those guys in together at this point.
So then that puts us, let's see, one was, I just want to recap this quick.
Yeah.
I got to write this shit down. We have
Padres 1.
We have Padres 1, Manoah 2, Mets 3. Perfect.
And then Angels and trade deadline, or just trade deadline at 4.
Who do you have at 6?
At 6, there's a few that I've thrown around, but to be honest, I'm surprised this team fell. And it's not only a team, but it's a specific player just because I find his send-off to be kind of sad. It's the St. Louis Cardinals and Adam Wainwright's farewell tour. I mean, it is weird to me, of all the teams in Major League Baseball, and I've been watching baseball for 20 years, it feels so weird that we're even in July not talking about the St. Louis Cardinals as being in the mix in some capacity. They were one of those teams that just lost their season in April. I mean, they got off to such a bad start, and I think that there was at least an expectation, hey, there's still some issues with the pitching, but the Cardinals find guys. You still got Arenado, you still got Goldschmidt. They'll find a way, and they'll give Wainwright a nice little send-off tour. ERA in the 7s. I mean, I wrote a blog about this. There's a legitimate chance, if we're talking final seasons, with a big enough sample size, maybe the worst final campaign ever for a great career. Did get to win 200. That was feel good. But man, the idea of the St. Louis Cardinals being this bad and kind of at a crossroads where they're going to need to contemplate what they're doing here, because I feel like they're kind of middle of the road at this point, both in terms of major league production and farm system production. So they're at an interesting place in their organization. But yeah, the idea of the St. Louis Cardinals being a non-factor early in the season, a rarity in the sport and a definite disappointment.
Do you know how much Adam Wainwright's getting paid this year? Good. I'll tell you. He signed a 1-year, $17.5 million deal after last season. Two seasons prior, 21-22. He threw 398 innings to like a 3.70 ERA and was effective. And similar to Abreu, Wainwright wasn't demonstrating these I'm going to fall off a table regression. You would see it slowly. It was rapid. It was very rapid. It's not like his stuff. It's not like he wasn't throwing 88 last year.
Right.
So I can't really make sense of it. But I think the collective thing too around it is, Yachty's last season, and Pujols coming back, and Magic, and playoffs, and people get to clap and cheer for you. This is awful. I mean, you got Wilson Contreras conflict early in the season. You're gonna waste 2 years. Like, we'll look back on this time and be like, wait, so Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado played on the same team together in their prime? Like, yes, that's the best corner infield combination I can ever remember.
I just feel like, and that's a really good point about Wainwright too, is like, it's not like last year he had some fine season with awful peripherals or something like that. He had a 3.66 FIP last year and his ERA was 3.71. Like, he was pitching really good baseball for them, and then it just became immediate. 13.5 hits per 9 innings this year. The guy's just getting clubbed. So yeah, a disappointing campaign. I've always appreciated the way that organization kind of goes about their business, and Wainwright getting to 200 was a nice moment, but as a whole, I don't know if it's an exaggeration to say it's the worst Cardinals team ever. I mean, they don't have many bad teams, so at least in the modern age, nothing but disappointment coming out of St. Louis.
Correct. They do not have many bad teams. They're actually always fucking awesome. I'm gonna take the Yankees' health. It's just been so. Maybe that's not disappointing. I don't know how to do this with the Yankees, but we have to put the Yankees here at 7. And I don't want to get too mean about Aaron Judge because he broke his toe on a concrete wall in Dodger Stadium. So maybe I'm disappointed in Dodger Stadium. I'm disappointed in Dodger Stadium for not having safer outfield walls.
Dodger Stadium walls is on the top 10 disappointments. I like that. Yeah.
Because hold on a second. I'm getting worked up here because, hey, Aaron Judge is like the top 5 player in baseball. Probably the best. All things considered, probably the best player in baseball. The Yankees could easily be in the wild card mix with Aaron Judge around. They is more than enough to, what are they, 6 games out? Yeah, fine, fuck it. That's the Dodger Stadium wall. And now we don't get to see Garrett Cole pitch a game 1. That would have been great. Oh, now I'm actually starting to get old man.
Well, no, it's so bizarre because the 2 big prized jewels of Yankees free agency, I know Judge came up through the system, but they gave him the huge extension. Then, of course, you signed Cole after 2019. These guys they've earned every cent of the contracts that Cole was signed about 4 years ago, and he is the best freaking pitcher in baseball this season. I mean, talk about going out on top. Complete game shutout last night to conclude his season. He's been incredible. If you would have told me, even with the Judge injury, that per plate appearance, he would average more home runs than he did in the 62 home run season, and Garrett Cole was going to run away with the American League Cy Young, I'd have said, dude, the Yankees are going to be a force. I mean, you can at least put him into one of those wild card spots, probably winning the American League East. It's not the core that's let him down. It's the pieces around the core that have kind of let him down. Their stars have played like stars. It just doesn't seem like Cashman's doing a good job of finding role players. And the Rodon contract looks bad, and Severino is awful. And, we can talk about the injuries, but when you have an aging team and you have guys like Giancarlo or in their or in their mid-30s, Severino's had a lot of injuries, like, you're going to run into those problems. Same with guys like LeMahieu. So, yeah, I mean, I liked them coming into the year, too, because I felt like that rotation could be locked down. And maybe it still could be, but fuck it, they're not healthy except for Cole. So yeah, I mean a shockingly disappointing Yankees campaign. Yeah.
Dodgers wall 7.
Yeah. I mean, how crazy is it the dude might get to 40 still? He missed 50 games. I mean, just generational power. Aaron Judge. So we're on to 8. Okay, I'm gonna go. Oh man, there's several ones you could go with, several teams. I'm gonna go with a player though. And I think my reasoning for it is kind of sound. I think one of my favorite pitching seasons ever, really, was Sandy Alcantara a year ago. I love, it's this weird thing, I call this DeGrom syndrome. I love starting pitchers on bad teams who go out and shove every 5th day, little run support, but I'm going to give you 7-8 scoreless innings every time. And he pitched over 220 innings a year ago, which in the modern age is kind of unheard of. And this year, not awful. WAR in the 3s, ERA in the 4s, poor record, I believe 7-12 record. But when you look at what the Marlins have done, it's frustrating because the Marlins as a team have overachieved. If you just could have gotten 50% of the Sandy Alcantara that you got the year before, not only are you talking about one of the best pitchers in baseball, you're talking about a team that would comfortably be in the playoffs. Looks like he's got a forearm issue, so I don't want to pile on him too much. But yeah, I mean, he was a revelation in 2022. Step back this season. It was disappointing because he was just an innings-eating machine a year ago. So Sandy Alcantara comes in my number 8.
I'll allow it. I think there's regression allowed when you win a Cy Young and throw all those innings in.
Mm-hmm.
But if Sandy was good this year, or even close to what he was last year, my Cubs are not in the wild card right now.
Fair point. Yeah.
It's very much competing with, who would it be? The Diamondbacks for the last spot?
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy the Marlins have been competitive without him.
Yeah. Well, they've kind of just duct taped this thing together. It's bizarre because it's not the most insanely talented team, and they wear their flaws on their sleeve, but they've been scrappy. Skip Schumacher's done a good job there.
Do you have a good feel? Let's see. Do you have a good feel for whether or not this Marlins team is legit, or is this just like a good season under Skip Schumacher's first time around, and like they're getting some luck, and is this a lucky team or a good team?
I don't know. I would lean towards lucky, sadly, and it stinks because I want them to be good. It's been so long since they've outside the COVID year, they haven't made the postseason since they won the World Series in 2003. But I do blind roster test, and I'm just like, I don't know of many GMs that would come into the season with this roster and say, oh man, like we really got some. And I get it, like great year out of Luis Arraez. You got the power numbers from Jorge Soler, but it's an incomplete group. with a negative run differential that has found a way to win a lot of close games. I think they've managed their pen pretty well. But yeah, as a whole, I do kind of lean towards this season being more fugazi. I think they've benefited from the fact that, the team like the Mets have taken a huge step backwards. That division, while very competitive, maybe not as competitive as they thought it would be. So yeah, I'm a little bit I'm pending some huge free agency move. I'm not going to be picking them to be much of anything next year, but it makes what's happened with Alcantara that much more disappointing. Like, man, if you could have gotten back to that point, you guys would be in great shape. So yeah, that's tough.
I have a reverse disappointment. I think that I'm disappointed with just how good the Braves are. Like, I'm disappointed with how hard it's going to be to ever get close to them in the next 5 years. I'm just disappointed with the reality of how good the top teams in baseball are, which really is the Braves. And you could then lump, as we say every week, there's another 5-6 teams you could lump in after they're competitively, Orioles at the top, obviously. I have to be sensitive to Orioles fans, because if you don't say that, they'll fucking start DMing you and emailing you and calling your house and sending you hate mail. So obviously the Orioles are very good. But I guess my disappointment is a personal disappointment that my team is so far behind the Atlanta Braves. Because this is what the Atlanta Braves did this year, is just went out and slapped everybody around in such historic fashion, and it's their bad boys too now. Ronnie Acuna's holding up he's a bad boy. I don't know. Can we do reverse disappointments here? Is that fair?
I think in the regular season, I think a better way to put it, potentially on if we do a graphic, would be the NL East race. Because to me, that was the one we looked at when we went, man, Mets, Phillies, Braves, this is going to be, you're going to have 3 95-win teams. And we knew early, by May, holy shit, the Braves are just better than everyone, aren't they? So I would say that this race, which a lot of people pointed to as being potentially one of the all-time great ones, this division was wrapped up in May, or at worst early June. So yeah, to me, that's the answer.
That's well said. The NL East race has been disappointing. I mean, the Phillies coming off a World Series run. I know losing Harper, so there was some trepidation out of the gate, but adding Turner, yeah, that's better. That's better. I really never would have thought the Marlins could have been better than Mets. I can't emphasize how surprising it is the Mets have been this bad. What do you have, Ted?
Okay, I'm throwing around. We can do a council meeting here, because like we do with the power rankings, where we kind of throw out a few ideas. Look, as a Tiger fan, I mean, even I, who didn't have the highest of expectations, am blown away, as should a lot of people, by Javier Baez's numbers. I mean, and just the fact that this is not a guy 5 years past his prime. I mean, he was a 5-WAR player 2 years ago. He's got an OPS plus of 61. I mean, 61, dude. I mean, on base percentage of 266. I mean, that's a solid batting average. That's rough. But I'm trying to think of a few more. I think one team that we've overlooked a little bit as a disappointment, because they play in a tough division, and because they didn't have the offseason that many people expected them to, so expectations are kind of lowered. But to me, the San Francisco Giants are one of those teams that for a solid decade there, you were just afraid of no matter what. If they got into October, look out. I mean, they had the every other year championships. And I just feel like they've become one of these teams that is just kind of there, competitive enough, good enough, but not really good enough to be playing with the big boys, officially eliminated from playoff contention. And 2 years ago, this is a 107-win ball club. I mean, was that a magic campaign? It definitely was. But I think that given the fact that this is a team that's won 3 championships in my lifetime, I expect a little bit more out of the Giants. And so they're kind of my pencil in pick, but I'm definitely open to others if you feel like there's one we might miss.
I'm not going to put the Giants here. I don't think the roster's good enough. They got screwed by Correa news in the offseason. I don't know. That's a tough one. They did lose Scott Harris too. He goes over to the Tigers, starts building you guys up. He had a good stretch there on that. He was very instrumental to that 107-win team. I I do like the bias numbers because of the 61 OPS plus, and as a point of reference, Miguel Rojas, shortstop for the Dodgers, has a 66 OPS plus. Yeah.
He can't hit it all.
He cannot hit a lick. So if what you're telling me is true about Javier Baez's OPS plus, and I'm sure it is, Chris. I'm sure you're reading it off the Baseball Reference page as we do this show.
I definitely am, yes.
$140 million contract is a lot of money. That's a lot. It's worse than Hayward when Hayward was a Cub getting a lot of money. So I know the pain and frustration of thinking you're bringing in someone who's going to be good. Someone with playoff experience. Nope. He sucks. I'm fine with Javier Baez here. He was bad last year, though. He was bad last year.
He was, and he drove me nuts last season. And I had a lot of Tigers fans saying, what are we going to get out of Javi? And I said, I bet we'll get about the same. So even for my low expectations, he somehow fell below those. Last year, worst offensive season of his career outside the COVID year, 278 on base, OPS plus of 91, but hit 17 home runs, drove in 67 runs. This year, 9 home runs, like I said, OPS plus of 61. And one thing that's being overlooked here, and I think it's a big reason why you got to put him 10th, or why he belongs on this list, is right now, and AJ Hinch, they've kind of said the quiet part out loud, he's not an everyday player right now. I mean, like in the last month or so, he's splitting reps as starting shortstop with Zach Short. Zach Short, God bless the guy. I don't think any Tiger fan figured by year 2 of this contract they'd be splitting time. So I mean, I can't, because of the deal, he's not playing his way out of the future. Like he's going to be the team's opening day shortstop. But I gotta call attention to it just because the fall off I expected at some point, because he's always been a low on base guy, for it to be this steep, for him to be the worst hitter on a team that offensively is like 28th or 29th in every category, while being their highest paid player outside of Miguel Cabrera, is, I mean, that's the last FU of the Al Avila era, was you're stuck with him, you know. Go ahead. Yeah,
I'm just giggling. I'm delighted with your disgust.
He drives me nuts, dude. He drives me. It makes me so mad, because here's the thing with Javi too, and you saw him in Chicago. I think Javier Baez can do things on a baseball field that maybe 0.1% of players are capable of doing. He has speed. He's got incredible range as a defender. But that's the other thing, man, is when you watch him play shortstop, I'm not even kidding you, dude. Once every other game, he bounces a routine throw to first base that Spencer Torkelson has to scoop out of the dirt. Like, I just think the fit was never right here. I think he's lost confidence in himself, and he's just failed to adjust.
I'm going to correct you. I'm going to tell you one thing that did not happen. Javi Baez did not lose confidence in himself. Javi Baez just doesn't give a fuck.
Well, that's every bit as bad, because I'd rather a guy be just struggling upstairs than somebody who's just incapable or unwilling to make the adjustments necessary to help.
Well, yeah, he's not going to adjust. Like, dude, he's been in the league this long. He's never adjusted. It's just the league continues. He crushes mistakes, and he can hit balls that other guys can't. Like when he gets hot and he's in a rhythm, he's very difficult to get out. He has those months where he hits 500, and he slugs 1,000 in a month. He's got, but he'll also have months where he hits 160. What you guys have gotten with Javi Baez is, none of those hot stretches, where he ran into a ton of those hot stretches with the Cubs. Now, I think that is a function of being in a better lineup, the league not knowing you as well. I don't think he's lost power or athleticism. I think he could still uncork it. He maybe isn't as aggressive on the bases. Like when he came up, he was super fun to watch because he would do crazy shit. He didn't care. He didn't care when he was really good, and he doesn't care when he's really bad. He's just Javi. And then the only way you can get to that spot as players is just have immense confidence in yourself. Like when he shows up, you don't give a fuck. Like, what's up, baby? Like, how you feel? Like, slap that on the butt cheeks. Like, I don't think that's changed. I just think the league knows exactly how to get him out, and he just can't help himself. He's just like a little kid around cookies. He just can't help himself.
Well, that's the thing, because I have Tiger fans, I have family members that come up to me. It's like, why does Javi keep chasing that same pitch? And AJ Hinch, to his credit, has said, Javi Baez is not uncoachable. So I'm just imagining Michael Brodeur, the hitting coach, in between every at-bat saying, you're going to get this, you're going to get this, watch out for this. And it's just, I think it's a psychological thing where sometimes the game, it's that Tyson quote, man, the game plan's going to get thrown out the window when somebody punches you in the mouth. And I just think that it's just inability to adjust. I think the point you brought up, it's something I've said and alluded to, which is I think Javier Baez fits so much better in a lineup where he's not top dog. I think the 2016 playoff run was a prime example of that for you guys where, hey, this is Zobrist and Rizzo and Bryant, and it's their team. You go through that murderer's row, and guess what? 6 or 7 spot, you got to pitch to this guy who's capable of hitting balls that are, at his face, balls that are, going to bounce, in front of home plate. It made him such a menace in that postseason run. Now the expectation when he got to Detroit is we're going to bat you 3rd or 4th, and he's just not high enough of an on-base guy. He's incredibly easy. He's become incredibly easy to pitch to and incredibly predictable. And it's set him back and it's set the Tigers back. I would argue, given his performance, the fact that this is a Tiger team that's going to get to 75, 76 wins is something of a remarkable overachievement and has me feeling pretty good about the future. But as a player, this division is so bad. If Javi Baez was league average, the story of this year's American League Central could be completely different. And that's with the Tigers offense being really underwhelming. So yeah, I mean, it's a disastrous deal. You got 4 more years. I have no idea what the plan is for him going forward. They're not going to cut him, but like with 4 more years in that contract, I don't know what you can do. I think you're going to continue to get the same player.
Good luck with that.
Right? No,
we didn't keep him. We got Dansby Swanson instead, so.
Perfect choice. I would have loved him.
We have Padres 1, Alec Manoah 2, the New York Mets 3, Ohtani not getting traded at the deadline 4, Tim Anderson and Jose Abreu seasons apart, but together. Adam Wainwright's farewell tour, which I love.
Yeah.
The Dodgers outfield wall padding, safety mechanisms. The NL East race generally, and number 9.
Or no, Alcantara I had at 8, and then we had the NL East race. Right.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Alcantara 8, NL East race 9, Javi Baez 10.
Yeah. I like that. And we're going to get a lot more. A lot of fans are going to check in, say this team, this team, this team. I think we got it pretty covered here in terms of the major storylines of the baseball season. I would say these are the 10 things that impacted the game the most with their disappointment, if that makes sense. Like, if we got a transcendent year out of Alec Manoah again, we'd be talking about the Blue Jays probably having their magic number down to 1 and not the Orioles, So yeah, it's been a lot of change.
Yeah. I'm as we were doing this show, I'm nervous that we're going to miss something big, huge. So I should acknowledge Trout, but like he's not going to be on a graphic. I don't know. I think we got all the big. We got the big ones. If we missed one, sure. DM me.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, there's a few individual players I've seen when I looked at some lists. I saw a lot of people with Jazz Chisholm on here, like, I can't go that far. Not top 10. Lance Lynn, I know it's had an awful year, but I don't view that as like massively disappointing. I just view that as basic regression. Guys that a lot of guys that fell off, but nothing. It's ironic because a month ago, I think Trey Turner probably would have been near the top of this list. And then he had the best month ever, and that all got erased. So yeah, I think we got it right.
Shout out Philly faithful for that ovation. We're going to be back on Sunday night, late, super late, super late. And that's okay. I think we're doing a full power ranking of the teams that make the playoffs. And who we think, under the context of who we think has the best chance of winning the World Series. So no one cares how you got there or whatever the case is. I'm pretty excited to do that show. I think it'll end up being a weird list. I like this disappointments. I like these disappointments.
Me too. Are you a fan of every game on Sunday starting right around the same time?
Yeah, I just wish they did it sooner.
Me
but
too.
They have
I
to
wish
accommodate
it
the
was
West
one.
Coast. They can't make West Coast teams play at 11. And I think it's
For
sharp
sure.
because they do the same thing with soccer. They have you all play at the same time, and that's just because there's just too much money and influence. Like, you can get to a starting pitcher and be like, hey, blow this game. Your dad's going to get a $2 million wire transfer. Like, I do think it's to protect the integrity of the results. So I think they all have to start at the same time.
Yeah.
I just wish it was 1 o'clock Central Standard Time, not 3 o'clock Central Standard Time, which is such a little stupid thing to bitch about. But what about you?
I like it. Yeah, no, I like it quite a bit. I think it's cool. I think for this year especially, when you're going to have a bunch of close races, I think it's going to be pretty neat, pretty unique. And I think it's cool because it's why, man, I wish MLB had like the equivalent of Red Zone where you could just bounce back and forth, because there's not only, I think this year especially, not only are there a lot of teams in tight races, there's a lot of players getting send-offs. You know, I mean, we've already saw Votto kind of get his standing ovation last week. Greinke might be done. We know about Cabrera. Like, I think it's going to be a really memorable final day of the season with everything kind of overlapping at the same time.
Good luck to everybody's team. These are the most disappointing stories of the 2023 season. We'll be back on Sunday. Hopefully your team wins. I know mine won't. We'll see you guys next time.